have been discussing flow through porous media, solved different examples and tried to convey this message that in what way the flow modeling can be done. We have also talked about the hydraulic conductivity, the coefficient of permeability, and I will discuss a bit more on coefficient of permeability in today's lecture. So, basically K depends upon several factors, and these factors are the porosity or void ratio, the particle size distribution, characteristics. We have used this concept of D10 and so on. The third parameter on which the K depends upon is the shape and orientation of the particles. The fourth parameter on which it depends upon is the saturation. And normally we define this as S. The another parameter on which it would depend is the type of cations which are present in the soil mass and the thickness of diffuse double layer. DDL stands for diffused double layer. We also call this as the adsorbed layer, and which is an indication of the activity of the minerals. So, if you remember the way we have defined K, we said K is equal to capital K multiplied by rho upon mu into G, and where capital K we have defined as the intrinsic permeability. So, basically K depends upon the density of the fluid and the viscosity of the fluid, and these two get influenced by the temperature. Alright. Now, this is a complete matrix. So, how the environmental conditions influence the hydraulic conductivity or coefficient of permeability, because they affect the density and viscosity of the fluid which is permeating, and these are the other parameters. So, the first parameter, if you want to understand what is the influence of the porosity or the void ratios, this is what is known as the Kozny-Karman relationship. This relationship is valid for mostly coarse grained materials. And it is written as the coefficient of permeability is equal to 1 upon C multiplied by T square into S square. C is the shape factor. It is understood that if the particles are spherical in nature, coefficient of permeability is going to be higher as compared to the particles which are flaky or the particles which are angular or subangular. T corresponds to the tortuosity. If you remember, we have talked about this in the previous lecture. Tortuosity factor is the length of the tortuous path divided by the L is the physical, or you may say this is tortuous path is nothing but the microscopic path or microscopic length, and this is the macroscopic length. Tortuous, tortuous. So, this is a square of T term, and S corresponds to the specific surface. I hope now you can realize it is not going to be easy to determine these coefficients, and these parameters can be obtained with the help of advanced instrumentation. So, this is E cube over 1 plus E multiplied by the density of water upon viscosity of water. The best way to find out shape factor would be laser microscopy. You can define the term that how the shape looks like. Tortuosity factor is a very difficult parameter to determine unless you go for some advanced instrumentation scheme like CT scanning, alright, or 4D X-rays. These are the techniques which are being used nowadays. This equation is normally not utilized for fine grained soils. Alright. Basically what it indicates is that K is a function of E, and you will find different variants in the books where people have tried with E upon 1 plus E also, but this is quite prevalent and this is what is known as Kozny-Karman relationship. Shape and orientation of the soil particles. You remember we have talked about the shape already. So, granular materials which are spherical in nature. So, this is number 3, spherical grains show very high hydraulic conductivity for the same density, remember, as compared to the fine grained materials. Now, as far as the orientation of the particles is concerned, I hope you remember this equation or relationship which I had plotted some time back when we were talking about the compaction curve, and what I had shown is that if this happens to be the OMC, you have the variation like this, alright. So, this is how the variation of permeability or the coefficient of permeability would be with respect to moisture content. So, at OMC the K value is minimum, on dry of optimum the hydraulic conductivity increases a bit with increase in the moisture content, and the best way to learn this would be the compaction curve, if you remember. So, this is the moisture content and this is the gamma D. So, these two are in combination to each other. Another thing we should remember is that on I am sorry, it is not dry of optimum, this is bed of optimum. You should correct me, and this is dry of optimum, alright. So, dry of optimum we have particles which are highly disoriented, alright, we call them as flocculated. And on the wet of optimum we have the particles which are more dispersed. So, by definition or by fundamental nature, a dispersed structure shows less hydraulic conductivity as compared to the flocculated structure. Then we talk about the formation also. And when I say formation, this could be basically geological formation. There are two types of systems we come across. This is the layered soil mass, and once you say layer number 1, layer number 2, layer number 3, it so happens that this has become heterogeneous soil mass, clear. But the assumption here is that each layer is isotropic in nature. So, I will be discussing more about this isotropic nature or heterogeneity of the material. What isotropy indicates is, if I take a point and if I measure its properties in the x, y and z direction, all the properties are going to be same. This is the isotropy, fine. But because of the multi-layered system, it becomes inhomogeneous or heterogeneous. So, a heterogeneous system could be isotropic layer wise. So, isotropic nature means the properties are same at a given point in all the 3 dimensions, alright. Now, this type of formation may occur in nature by virtue of deposition. You remember we had talked about all these things quite earlier when we were talking about the how soils are formed. So, in this case we would be very eager to know what happens to the hydraulic conductivity when the flow is taking place perpendicular to the bedding direction. So, this is the flow which is perpendicular to the plane of bedding. What is bedding? Sediments are being carried by the rivers, and because of the density contrast or because of the gravity they settle down. So, the formation of the entire soil mass is taking place layer wise. Horizontal lines which I have shown are the bedding planes, and this indicates the discharge in the vertical direction which is perpendicular to the plane of bedding. I will be more interested in also finding out what would be the QH. So, this is the horizontal flow of the fluid which is taking place through a layered system, alright. Now, I hope you can realize that this is going to be the parallel to the bedding. Now, in today's lecture we will prove very shortly that what is your opinion, which one is going to be more, QV, QH, or suppose if I quantify this as K vertical and this as K horizontal, what is your opinion, what is your gut feeling, which one should be more? Very nice. Why do you say so? There will be, sorry, Why? Answer is correct. Very good. So, we will prove it mathematically. The logic says the groundwater flows in the vertical direction or in the horizontal direction. What is the direction of movement of the groundwater? Groundwater always moves in the horizontal direction, parallel to the bedding planes. Why? Because the permeability is always going to be higher. In the vertical direction, I hope you will realize that the density contrast is going to be much more as compared to the horizontal direction. So, the way the system was getting formed, each particle was getting deposited like this. Is this okay? Now, the discharge is taking place through the interstices, and hence the resistance offered is going to be less. Okay. Now, this is valid for the dispersed structure also. So, if I try to see how the migration of fluid takes place through the dispersed structure, I have to define what is their geological formation. Clear? I hope now this part is clear to you. So, we will try to prove this very soon. Now, as far as the saturation is concerned, there is a relationship between K and S. So, saturation of the soil is defined as, I hope you understand, the amount of water which is present in the pores to the volume of the pores. Okay. So, normally this is a cubic relationship. Those of you who might get a chance to work in all these petroleum companies, Schlumberger and what not, Shell, you will be using throughout your life this type of a relationship, because soils are not going to be saturated always. Why? Because you have a lot of methane, a lot of gases trapped in the sediments, clear. So, this is a relationship which we are going to use. Normally, we define saturation as something which is greater than 90%. Alright. So, if soil sediments are approximately or greater than 95%, we call them as saturated. If not, they become unsaturated, and about 30% less than, we define them as dry. Alright. So, this is the relationship as far as saturation is concerned. Now, what is going to happen to the type of the cations? The more presence of active minerals, alright. So, if active minerals, their fraction increases, I have defined this as active minerals, alright. What is your guess? So, the more the active minerals present in the system, the double diffuse layer is going to be quite big, the resistance offered by this system to the fluid flow is going to be less, and hence your hydraulic conductivities are going to be less. The same thing is valid for the cation exchange capacity also, alright. Number 6, I think this we have already discussed. So, K would be proportional to density of the fluid, alright, and inversely proportional to the viscosity of the fluid. Is this okay? So, a denser fluid is going to permeate easily provided its viscosity is less. Is this part clear, or vice versa? Any questions? We have also talked about the methodologies for determination of K. So, until now we have discussed two methods which are mostly the laboratory methods. If you remember, these are the constant head test, and the falling head test. In the next course, we will be talking about some other methods which can be utilized for obtaining the coefficient of hydraulic conductivity or coefficient of permeability. There is another test which we will be defining very shortly when we talk about the consolidation characteristics of soils. So, I can use a consolidometer to obtain the K value. This is to be discussed slightly later when we discuss about the consolidation characteristics. As I said, another method would be a triaxial method or triaxial tests. This I will be discussing in course number 2, Geotechnical Engineering part 2. As far as the in situ tests are concerned, what we do is number one a pumping in test. So, we will discuss about this, or it could be a pumping out test. What we do is we drill a well and then pump out water or pump in water and we see how much the drop in the head is going to take place in unit time. There is another series of tests which is known as the Packer's test. Alright. There is another interesting way of defining the permeability of the formations under in situ conditions, particularly those of you who will get a chance to work in deep excavations in rock mass, would be Lugeon test. We call this as Lugeon index. So, this is what is used for fractured rock mass. Incidentally, one of the ways to define the hydraulic conductivity would be in the units of Darcy also. So, K can also be defined in the form of Darcy. Alright. Depends upon in which continent you are working and in what type of problems you are working. Any questions related to this? No? Alright. So, let me take up now some in situ tests. When we talk about the in situ test, we have to be very particular about in what type of aquifer I am working. This could be the confined aquifer. In your hydraulics course, I am sure you must have studied this. And the second one is the unconfined aquifer. So, by definition, suppose if this is the ground level and if I drill a well, this is a bore well. Sometimes people also term this as a tube well. It is basically a bore well. You are boring into the soil, cutting the soil and putting down a casing, and most of the time this casing is perforated. Alright. So, this becomes a bore well. That means you have bored the soil and then you have lowered down the stainer or a casing which is made up of steel to support the soil, otherwise soil will collapse and the well is not going to function. So, this is perforated, and suppose we have a water layer somewhere here, initial water layer somewhere here. This is the water table, not water layer, sorry, water table, and somewhere here you have a hard rock. Alright. And this is the soil mass. the system in which the boundaries are not defined, clear, and they are open, this becomes unconfined aquifer. Okay. So, you have to monitor closely the difference between 2 and 1. When I draw the figure for 1, I am just discussing now the unconfined aquifer case. Now, suppose if I start pumping out water, what is going to happen? This water table is going to diminish, lower down, clear. We had talked about effective stress analysis when the lower water, when the groundwater table decreases. So, imagine there is a building somewhere over here, alright, and without telling you, someone starts a industry and he or she is trying to suck out all the water for creating, let us say, utility items. Now, what is going to happen? This water table is going to subside. Is this okay? Because of the discharge pumping out operations. This is the steady state situation. I would say a final state, because I have written steady state. Is this okay? Now, the way these tests are done is, you create a well of certain dimension, start pumping out, and then you create 2 observation wells. So, observation wells could be located in the vicinity. This is observation well number 1, this is observation well number 2, and what we are going to observe? How much the groundwater has depleted. Is this okay? Delta H in both the cases. So, this is in ground, this is in the well number 1, observation well number 1, this is observation well number 2. I hope you can understand that this delta H is nothing but again the discharge which is taking place. No, sorry, this has been created because of discharge Q. Is this okay? Q has caused this delta H1 and delta H2 to appear. Now, suppose if I define the well radius as capital R, from the radial distance to this is, let us say, R1, this is R2, alright, and suppose if I take at a distance of R another hypothetical well which represents a hypothetical surface, okay. So, this is a hypothetical surface. I hope you can realize when you are pumping out water, the discharge is going to take place perpendicular to the surface. Is this correct? Have you understood this? So, this is a sort of a cylindrical curved surface, perpendicular to this the discharge is going to occur. So, if this is R and thickness of this element is dr, clear, height of this surface is, let us say, h, fine. Can I write a relationship between Q as a function of R1, R2, H1, H2 and so on, because Q is nothing but K into I into A. Is this okay? So, K is the principal unknown. Remember, we are doing the field test to obtain the coefficient of permeability. What is I? Area is not an issue, area I can obtain. What is the area? The curved surface will be 2 pi r into h. Is this okay? So, I need not to bother about this thing. So, that means area will be 2 pi r into h. What is I? hydraulic gradient. Now, how would you find out a hydraulic gradient? Now, this is where we have to take help of a theory which is known as Dupitt's theory. This is valid only very close to the wells. So, as you go away from the well, what you will observe is Dupitt's theory is not valid because this curve flattens. Now, as per Dupitt's theory, the slope of this line corresponds to the I value. That means del H upon del R would be equal to I. Is this okay? Now, what we know? We know the value of Q because the moment I start pumping out test, I know how much volume of water I have taken out per unit time. So, Q is known. I have two observation wells. Why? Because if you substitute these values over here, you will realize that this is going to be a quadratic equation. So, K into del H upon del R multiplied by 2 pi R into H. Okay. So, K I into A. So, I can write this as del R upon R equal to K by Q and 2 pi into H into del H. Is this okay? So, del R upon R equal to K by Q del H 2 pi H. Now, this becomes my governing equation. I can solve this easily. What I have to do? The whole idea of creating two observation wells was I know the R1, I know the R2. Clear? I know the total values of heads and I can solve this expression. Is this okay? So, what I can do? I can use a sort of a magnetic tape, not magnetic tape, I can use a device, electronic device, I will lower it down. The moment it gives me a beep, it is understood that I have touched the water table, I know this value. Similarly, I know this value, I can substitute over here and I can get the values of K. This is something like the cylinder. So, if you remember, this is the curved surface, this becomes my R, alright. So, the bore well is somewhere here and this is the surface perpendicular to which the flow is taking place, alright. Not both sides, all sides, it is a symmetric against the axis. We call this as a two dimensional axisymmetric problems. Fine. The difference between this situation which is now, so basically what is the difference between unconfined and confined aquifers? The more you take out water, the more water table keeps on drowning, there is no constraint on this. So, these type of aquifers are known as unconfined aquifers. Now, suppose if I introduce a layer of aquifer in this manner, this is the ground surface and this is the layer of the aquifer. This is the hard rock, this is the ground surface and this happens to be, let us say, a clay of seam of clay. And I am pumping out water. I hope now you realize that this is what is going to be the soil mass, and what has happened? The soil mass is now constrained between the two impermeable boundaries 1 and 2, clear. So, what is going to happen? This surface is always going to be bound by this. Is this okay? So, that means when you have put a constraint on the porous media through which the discharge is going to take place, this becomes a confined aquifer case. Here what is happening? Here the surface area is changing with respect to time. The more you pump out, this value of H keeps on dropping down. Here this is going to be constant, and then what about the water table? The water table would be somewhere here. This is the initial water table, okay, and the more and more I suck it out, what's going to happen? It has to be below this, that's it. So, if you solve this expression, what's going to happen here? This your area term will be, if I take it as a distance of r, this will be 2 pi r into h, h remains constant. Now, we are going to use these concepts quite a lot in our analysis either today or in the next lecture, fine. So, what we have talked about until now is coefficient of permeability, what are the parameters on which it depends, how to obtain permeability, coefficient of permeability in the laboratory, in the field, then these two situations, and I hope this helps you. What is the IB? That will remain same, because ultimately what is going to happen? Your heads will remain constant, is it not? I am just trying to highlight this point that the discharge is now going to take place through this curved surface only. In this case, the surface itself was varying with respect to time. So, that is the difference between the confined layer or unconfined layer. What he says is that K has to be a function of time, life will become absolutely difficult. So, these tests are done for short durations, and for that short duration you are assuming that the material properties remain constant. Which height? So, again you can extrapolate this to this thing, that when the T's are very small, the drop in heads are going to be extremely small, because del H upon del R has to be, you know, a valid function. So, the limitations of this model are two. One is, to make this finite I cannot go much beyond, hope agreed, because then this becomes del H upon del R tending to 0. At the same time you can't do this test very close to the well also, because it takes time to stabilize the system. So, your question is, and the best answer would be, we are assuming material properties to be constant for the time being. The second assumption could be discharge value is not too much, alright. So, normally we do this test for 10 minutes at the most. It answers your question. Another interesting manipulation which I can do is, I can, rather than taking out water or the fluids, I will pump in. I think we discussed about this case earlier when we were talking about the subsidence. I have given you logic also. The entire Venice city, what people are trying to do, they are trying to lift it up by pumping in water, okay. So, depends upon what type of engineering solution you are giving to your client, you might have to pump in water also, okay. So, one more thing I would like to discuss, that is the unsaturated hydraulic conductivity. So, until now what we have discussed is about the saturated states of the material. Present day geomechanics is heading towards unsaturated state of the material. So, sometimes people also want to know the unsaturated soil hydraulic conductivity. Ku. So, we are now differentiating, you must have noticed very cleverly the difference between K sat, this was all K saturated, alright, and Ku. There are many schools including the Cardiff where most of the guys are working only on Ku. Why? Because most of the geotechnical engineering applications are related to unsaturated state of the material. Nuclear waste disposal, buried cables, buried pipelines, buried hydrocarbon facilities, nuclear explosions, municipal solid waste, alright, chemical reactions going on in the soil mass. So, everywhere you will find that the moisture front moves out and soil becomes unsaturated. So, it is a very interesting way of obtaining it, though it is not a very accurate solution, but to begin with I think you can use the concepts what we have discussed in the classroom. So, what normally is done is you take a glass tube and seal it from both ends by trapping some soil mass into it. So, this soil mass is unsaturated, or let us say dry soil mass, which is compacted at some gamma d, alright. Submerge the entire thing into a water bath. So, what I have shown here is the water bath. Is this okay? And let the moisture front move in the I can create different type of boundary conditions. Now, suppose if I shift, I think coming back to our discussion which we are having in earlier lectures, if I create at point 1 and point 2, where point 2 is the capillary interface. So, the moment I open the valve, what is going to happen? This water is going to enter into the dry soil mass, and imagine you can do this experiment also. You fill up the dry soil and then open the valve, let the water move in. So, this is the distance x in a given time t of the water front, which is moving from left to right. Is this okay? You can imagine. Compute the total head at point 1 and compute the total head at point 2. Suppose if I say the total head at point 1 is 0, suppose if I shift my datum somewhere here at a height of h, the elevation head is minus h and the piezometric surface would be h. So, total energy at this point is 0. What about this point? If I consider this point just on the left hand side of the water front, what will be the head on this point? Capillarity is the dry phase which is just being negotiated by the water. So, at point h2 the elevation is minus h and the capillary head is minus hc. So, the total head would be minus h plus hc. So, you know the hydraulic gradient. What is the length of the path? X. I can do this experiment, I can measure the x over a period of time and I know how much x has moved in with t. Hc is unknown, alright. So, the moment I know h upon x, which is the hydraulic gradient, what is the value of discharge? And here I want to find out K unsaturated. So, this K will become unsaturated. Truly speaking, you may debate that Darcy's law is not valid for unsaturated hydraulic conductivity, but still we are trying to use it because there is no harm in getting something which is approximate as compared to very precise. Is this okay? So, if you know the area of cross section of the system, I is known. What are the principal unknowns? K is unknown and What else? HC. What about the velocity term? X by T. Is this okay? And if I want to find out seepage velocity, this will be x upon T upon porosity. I am not very sure about what is the saturation state, so I will put a penalty on this porosity. I will multiply by SR. So, what I have done? I have penalized the porosity. You understand what is the meaning of penalizing some parameter? Uncertainty. If SR is equal to 1, porosity is eta is fine. If SR is not equal to 1, this will be some fraction of porosity which is contributing to the whole process. So, now if I say that this Q is what? Ki into A, and I know the Vs term is alright. What I can do? A into Vs is going to be the discharge. Can I equate this function with this function? And then what is going to be unknown? X I can measure, T I can measure, Ku and Sc are unknown. So, in this equation you are going to have two unknowns. Is this fine? So, what I should be doing? If I play with this H, so what did I tell you? I can raise and lower down the column of the saline solution or the water column. So, if I play with H, what is going to happen? I will be having different values of H. Let us say if I create H1 and H2 corresponding to time T1 and T2. Are you getting this point? So, I have two equations, I have two unknowns, I can solve them. So, those of you who might pursue your career in unsaturated state of soil mechanics, your studies will start from this point onwards. So, your question of K is time. Who was talking about K as a function of time? You were talking about K as a function of time? Oh, you, Manan. So, that is a interesting question. Now, tell me, have I answered this question or not? All these Ku's are going to be function of time. Why? And the head which is causing them. Now, very intelligently what I can do is, I will let the entire waterfront move through, the whole system of length L will become saturated. I get rid of this uncertainty, clear? All my pores are saturated with water. This system becomes a saturated soil sample through which I am doing hydraulic conductivity test. So, let us move on now to the layered systems of soils. Until now we have been considering all homogeneous isotropic situations, clear? Now, let us introduce into it inhomogeneity, non-homogeneous sometimes people call it. Inhomogeneity is a better word. So, how inhomogeneity will be introduced? By considering layers, what we were discussing there. Now, the mechanics part is coming in. The hydrostatics we did, then we started with the hydrodynamics of the porous media, clear? And now we have related the hydrodynamics to the different field applications. And now we are going to come to the extremely real life situation. So, that is what we discussed over there, the way the formation of the deposits occurs. So, if I consider a layered system of soil mass, so this is layer number 1, layer number 2, layer number 3 and so on. We might be having layer number n as well, alright. I repeat, it is a inhomogeneous system, heterogeneous system of soil mass, because you have different layers, but what we are assuming is that each layer is isotropic in nature. That means, at a given point the properties, density, void ratios, hydraulic conductivity are going to be constant. So, if I were you, Manan, I would have asked a question that why K only as a function of T? Is this correct? I hope you are realizing this. In most of the pumping out tests, what happens? Fine particles from the soil mass get washed out. Clear? So, why pumping out tests are detrimental to the safety of structures? When you are pumping out water excessively, the chances are all the fines will also move out, and the moment fines move out, the density of the system is going to decrease, because remember the fine fraction only contributes to the density of the system. Why? You have a system like this, and all these fine particles were making the system more compact, dense. Now, when you are doing pumping out operation, all these particles have washed out because of what? I gamma W, previous lecture. See, the beauty of geomechanics is that you cannot study this in discreteness. Are you getting the application of all the concepts which I have discussed in last 2-3 lectures? All these fine particles are getting lifted up by I into gamma W per unit volume. So, the more and more pumping you do, the more and more hydraulic gradient develops, clear, and these particles get lifted up, which results in a loss of void ratio and gamma D. The system becomes more porous. A more porous system, the chances are that it will collapse, it will show more volumetric deformations, it will show more subsidence. Is the story clear? Fine. So, I have knit lot of concepts together in today's discussion. So, let me attribute some dimensions to this. Let us say this is of length L, and x1 is the width, x2, x3, this is, let us say, I will simply say K1, alright. Life is already very complicated, so I am not changing other parameters, K2, K3 and so on. I can create two situations here, if you remember, flow taking place perpendicular to the bedding and flow parallel to the bedding, clear. Now, all of you have done equivalent circuits, resistances in series and parallel and batteries in parallel and series, 10+2 physics, hope sure. Can this system not be represented like now? Suppose if I ask you to fill in the blanks, what is flowing through this on the right hand side? Current. Current gets distributed. Is this correct? So, you said here that I gets distributed in the form of I1, I2, I3 and it comes out from the system. What remains constant? Very good. Voltage. Where is the voltage getting applied? Across the resistances, clear. So, if you consider this as point number 1 and this as point number 2, what you said is the delta V12 remains constant. Is this okay? Suppose if I allow flow of water to take place through this, what is going to happen? Is this situation not similar to the one which I have drawn? Have you understood? Clear? As if multiple pipes are connected to this face through which the discharge is going to take place. So, that means QH is equal to Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3 Qn, and the analogy is this. What remains constant? What remains constant is the voltage across, not in this case voltage, hydraulic gradient. So, if this is HA on this plane and on this plane if it is HB, what is the hydraulic gradient? Hydraulic gradient would be delta delta H equal to HA minus HB over length. This becomes I. Is this okay? Now you can complete the whole exercise. So your QH will be equal to K equivalent horizontal. Is this okay? Multiplied by I. What is I? HA minus HB over L into area of cross section. What is the area of cross section? X1 plus X2 plus X3. Clear? And most of these aquifers or the soils beddings are going to be in the third dimension like this. Is this okay? So this is going to be, let us say, W width. I can always take perpendicular unit section of 1 meter length. So as if sheets of the soils are sitting over each other. So that means the area of cross section is going to be now x1 plus x2 plus x3 this multiplied by W. Is this part clear? No issues? Analogy is clear? And then now you know what is Q1. Q1 will be equal to K1 I x1 into W. Is this okay? So you know all the expressions. Tell me what will be KH equivalent. Quick. Yes, very nice. So this would be sigma Ki into Xi. Nice. Sigma. Very good. So you have understood the whole thing. I could be 1 to n and this I will be also 1 to n. Is this part clear? No confusions? Now if I revert the situation, so we have already got for H equivalent. Now suppose if I change the direction of the flow, or if I am interested in finding out what is going to happen to, let us say, KV equivalent, draw on your notebooks equivalent circuit first and try to understand what is getting distributed now. In this case the current got distributed, agreed? Now what is going to get distributed? Sorry, voltage, true. So as if this system is current entering into a system of R1, R2, R3 and so on, and about point number, let us say that was AB, like in the lateral direction, here I can say XY, no I will not use XY, I will use, let us say, what should I use, 1 and 2. Okay. So this is your point number 1 and this is your point number 2, as if multiple layers of the resistances are arranged in a series manner. Work out K equivalent. I think you must be remembering the equation also. So how do you solve this function? So if I say the Q is entering into the layers and it remains Q always, is this okay? So this Q is equal to, we know this or we have to measure this, this one will be equal to K1 into I1. What is I1? So now this is going to be between let us say this is A and B, HA minus HB over X1 into area of cross section. What is the area of cross section? W into L. Like this you can complete the whole thing. What you are observing here is the next term is going to be HB minus HC. Is this okay? We did this problem in the last lecture also. Remember this case? I was talking about a situation where starting from PM1, let us say PM material, I will create a multi-layer system, and then we were debating upon that at this point I do not know the head. I do not know the head at point B, C, D, intermediate points, clear? So, how would you solve this equation, or how would you solve this situation? Are you getting this point? The question here is I do not know what is the head at point B, C, D and so on. I hope you understand this. Insert piezometers and then do something. Otherwise, this is an interesting question. Otherwise, you have another equation in this form. This Q remains constant. Use this equation, correct? So, this is equal to this, and this will be equal to the next one, and so on. So, ultimately, you are getting a relationship between HA, HB, HB, HC, and the total head across this is going to be, let us say, HA and Z. So, this will be equal to K vertical equivalent multiplied by I. So, I will be HA minus HZ upon L. What is the value of L? Xi sigma. Is this okay? Fine. Multiplied by W into L. This is nothing but the total length of the system, the total length of the flow, and your area of cross section will be L multiplied by W. Fine. So, this is going to be same as each one of them. And what is the relationship between HA minus HZ? This will be equal to HA minus HB. The hydraulic gradient is getting dissipated or getting added up. So, this total head will be equal to this plus this plus this plus this. So, you write here this will be equal to this plus another term and so on. So, can you guess what will be the K vertical equivalent would be? Any guess? 1 upon R equal to 1 upon R1 plus 1 upon R2, that equation you remember. What happens in case of capacitance? C1 plus C2. Now, this concept nowadays being used in geomechanics to create equivalent circuits of soils, and on which many of them are working. So, we do impedance spectroscopy at very high frequencies and we try to get the response of the material, and when we do modeling and all. So, yeah, tell me what this would be. Sigma Xi, very good, sigma, very nice. Please try to prove this. What is your intuitive feeling? Which one is going to be more, KH equivalent vertical or KH equivalent horizontal? Are you sure? 100%. So, this proves that KH is greater than this one, and hence mostly the flow of groundwater is in the lateral direction and so on. It is okay. Any questions? It is relatively simple. Now, as you approach consulting world, if you are a consultant, I mean, I am sure you are not going to get these type of problems straight away. So, what is going to happen here? You have two attributes it with, I hope all of you can do this now. I can introduce G also here. So, hydraulic conductivity is a function of material type, G. Specific gravity is the fingerprint of the type of soil, clear. Porosity, dry density, saturation, what else is required? This becomes a real life application of your cases. Let us revisit the problem which we did earlier, where I was asking you to find out sigma, sigma, sigma prime and UW. Now, what is the difference between those problems and the problem which we are discussing since just previous lecture? So, all that knowledge gets superimposed with the flow of water. In what way? What seepage does? Seepage forces. So, I think we discussed in the last lecture what is going to change. So, these are all static hydraulic pressures and they will get added up with seepage forces. I just need to write a line in the question, under seepage conditions compute the total stress, effective stress and the pore pressure. But what is the consultant you are going to do? Life becomes difficult now. You have to go to the site, measure these parameters. How would you do that? Core cutting, core logging, bore holes, take out samples, bring them to the lab, compute these parameters, specify each layer, clear? Put piezometers at the site along the depth of the entire system which you want to study, get the pore pressures, clear, and then make the problem as much as non-redundant as you can. So, this is where the theory and the experimentation gets assimilated in real life.